Welcome to Ponytails and Pep Talks, the podcast where blowouts, breakdowns, and breakthroughs are a weekly discussion. I'm your host, Regina. For over 3 decades, I've been behind the salon chair as a stylist, an owner, and yes, your favorite unlicensed therapist. I have heard it all. The tears, the triumphs, the you won't believe what just happened stories from courageous women overcoming incredible obstacles. So let's meet one of them right now on Ponytails and Pep Talks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Ponytails and Pep Talks. I'm so glad that you joined us today. Today's episode is about a life well lived, but certainly not void of difficulties. My guest today has in her story joy and peace, but sadness, life, death, serious health issues, heartbreak, strong faith, and several new beginnings. And still she says, I'm a happy old lady. If you'll introduce yourself, please, to the listeners and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. My name is Rita Weber. I've lived in the Bernie area since 1977. I came from an Air Force family. We lived in Japan and all over the United States. I became a Christian at Vacation Bible School at Misawa Air Force Base, Japan. And that, of course, was the very best thing that ever happened to me in my whole life, even though I've had many, many, many blessings since.
Rita, thank you for joining us on the show today. And it's a super privilege to see how God has worked in your life. So tell me how you settled into the phrase happy old lady. How did that come about?
Well, I have a very good friend who likes to have philosophical religious chats with me. And she came over one day and we were sitting at the table having coffee. And she said, well, how's your life going? And so I was stumbling around trying to tell her how my life was going. I wasn't expecting that question. And I just, I said, well, I'm doing well. I think I'm happy. Everything's going. I haven't been sick lately or anything. She says, oh, so you're saying you're just a happy old lady. I said, exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. I am a happy old lady. And I give every thanks to God for that because He has been so good to me all my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, one of the things you said you became a Christian at around 10, 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
but you grew up in a Christian home, Christian
Yes.
grandparents, parents, so tell me a little bit about how life was like just growing up in a Christian home. You never really knew anything else but that.
That's true. My great grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, all of our family was Christians. We all went to church all the time, and whether we wanted to or not, the
That's
kids.
right.
But I have often marveled when listening to other people that I know talk that I grew up in almost a totally happy home. My
Wow.
parents, if they ever argued, and I'm sure they had to, we never knew it. They never argued in front of us. Our home was very peaceful. Our parents loved us and actually liked us and did everything that they could to make us happy. And we didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
money, but we had a lot of love, and that was all we needed. It made all the difference. When I was in high school, the French teacher said, Rita, where are you going to go to university? I said, oh, I don't think I'll be going to college. We just don't have that kind of money.
Hmm.
And she looked at me and she says, well, there are such things as scholarships. And so I went
Ah,
home after school, and there was mother in the kitchen, as she always was at that time of day. And we chatted, and I told her about what my French teacher had said. And I told her I probably wouldn't go to college. She looked at me and she says, we have been saving for you to go to college since you were born.
oh, you
Well,
didn't even know.
and I didn't even know it. Yes. And sure enough, I did. I went to the University of New Mexico.
That's incredible. Let's go back to when you were a young child. And you say in your book, you just had this incredible thirst for knowledge. You couldn't get enough of books and reading. How did this help you realize the calling that God had on your life?
Well, I didn't realize it. I just thought it was really an interesting way to live because
Mm,
my parents were real good about seeing that my questions got answered insofar as they were able. I think my mother nearly had a nervous breakdown before I went to the first grade. But it was, they bought me lots of books and sent me to camps and all the things that you can do to, broaden a child's horizons. And I just, but I didn't really connect that with God. I mean, I knew I was blessed, but I was a
Hmm.
kid. I didn't think about it very
Sure.
much. But
Right.
when I started writing the book, is when I actually started to realize what had been going on in my life all these years because I'd never stopped to think about it. I was too busy doing it.
Right.
But
It was just life. It was just what you were doing
that's
day to
right, it's
day.
just life, right? But I had time to reflect as I wrote. Often I would be writing along, and all of a sudden I'd realize, well, that's something I didn't know. And I would stop and look at it again. And so I did a lot of thinking while I wrote the book, and I realized that
Hmm.
I had actually been living in the goodness of God my entire life. He
Wow.
had blessed me in so many ways, given me such a good home and friends and adults in my life who cared about me and wanted to make sure I learned things and
Yes.
knew about the Lord. And it was really a great experience for me to write the book. Though sometimes I felt like that I was not actually writing it myself, but that God
Oh,
was
yeah.
doing it,
Exactly.
Excuse my dog who thinks she must be in on everything that I am doing.
That's okay. I've had many personal animals in people's laps during
Good.
the whole
I'm
video,
glad.
so it works fine. Well, tell me, when you went to college, what did you go to college for? What did you become?
Well, I intended to major in journalism because I had been the editor of the high school newspaper when I was in school, and I had won some journalism awards and that kind of thing. And that's what I was going to do until
Mm-hmm.
the very first biology class, which was a class I had to take.
Okay.
I walked in, sat down, the man started talking, and that was the end of journalism. For me,
Oh,
it was biology all the way. And then I
oh,
decided to specialize in microbiology and learned all about things you can't see unless you have a microscope. And it was fascinating to me. So that's how I got into it. I just fell in love with it.
that's so interesting. So, is this where you met your husband?
No, I met my husband when I was still in junior high school. We
Oh,
went on
okay.
a hayride together. His sister was a
Uh,
really good friend of mine, and he had a CYO, Catholic Youth Organization, hayride to go to, and didn't have anybody to take. And so she said, "Why don't you take my friend Rita?" And so he did, and that was that. I mean, the rest of our lives, and we were just like, you know,
so, did you continue to be high school sweethearts and then college sweethearts and then got
well,
married?
we were high school sweethearts.
Yes.
The day Joe was a year ahead of me in school, and the day after he graduated from high school, he joined the Navy.
Okay.
His home life was not nearly as blessed as mine was.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some conflict there with his father. So he joined the Navy to get away from that. And so we were still together the first year, but then my second year of college started, and I became angry with him because he never wrote letters and he didn't call very often. So one day he
Oh,
did call when I was not in a real good mood. And I said, "Hey, how come I've been sitting by myself, night after night, never going out with anybody else, and you are having a
yeah.
wonderful time in your sailor suit?" So anyway, we broke up. So we did not
Right.
go together for the next, I guess, well, 2 years until he got out of the Navy and came home
Okay.
to
And looked you
Albuquerque.
up.
And I was living with his sister. She was my roommate. So, of course,
Oh,
I saw him.
yeah.
And one night he said, "Let's just go out to dinner just for old time's sake, for friends." And I said, "Okay." So we did. And we were driving down the road after dinner, and nobody was saying anything. It was very quiet. And finally, and I just felt like that the Lord was saying to me, "You are about to make the biggest mistake of your life if you don't say something that needs to be said." So my mouth opened and I said, I think we should just get married. And he slammed on the brakes so hard he nearly took the front end out of the car. I mean, just crash.
My
And
gosh.
and Joe, I never heard him say a curse word before, he said, "I don't think that's a damn bit funny." I said, "I'm not kidding." And the next morning, I had a ring, and
Wow.
I called my mother and father because they were in San Antonio, Texas by then, and I was
Hmm.
still in Albuquerque. I said, "Joe's home from the Navy, and we want to get married before school starts. That's 2 weeks from now." There was a very long silence, and finally she said, uh, uh, let me talk to your father." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll be home after school's out. Summer school gets over the end of this week, and I'm coming home then." And so that was that. So I went home. Found out later my dad had been having a heart attack because he thought, you know, this was all very precipitous when we hadn't been going together for 3 years, and what in the world were we doing, and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I talked him into it pretty quickly, and mom made my dress, and
Oh,
Joe came
wow.
on the week before the wedding so we could get a license. And
Hmm.
he needed a new suit because he hadn't had one since the Navy, and nobody would give him any credit because he had just gotten out of the Navy and he didn't have any money. So my
Right.
dad had a new suit for the wedding, so he let Joe wear it, and he wore his old
Aw.
suit.
Yes.
Then
Oh.
when we came back to Albuquerque, Daddy gave Joe his old suit, and that's what Joe
Yes.
wore to church for the next, I don't know how many years, probably a very long time. And yeah, so anyway, we got married. Went left the afternoon of the wedding to drive back to Albuquerque, and because my senior year in college was about to start.
Hmm.
That was like I took 21 hours of upper division lab courses that semester, which on
Wow.
reflection was a really stupid thing to do. But
Oh,
yeah,
never.
I went to, yeah,
Knowledge is never stupid.
yeah, that's right. But he got a job pushing aircraft around at the local small airport, and I got a job working for a microbiology professor, and we didn't
It all
starve.
worked out. No, exactly. So, how long were y'all married till you started having children?
Well, for the first 5 years, I was in let's see, I was in school for another year, and then I went to work, and he was working on his aviation ratings, and we didn't really have enough money to have a baby. But
Right.
about 5 years in, we said, okay, we're going to start getting this serious about this thing. And
Yeah.
I didn't get pregnant. And after
Mm.
5 years, I really had kind of given up. I thought maybe God thinks I would put the baby down and forget where it was. Because I was not domestic in any sense of the word. My mind was full of, thoughts of bacteria and things like that. And
Right.
I had never I'd never cooked. I did not know how to cook at all.
Hmm.
Anyway, one day came back from lunch, and the coffee pot was on at the lab. And I thought, ooh, I feel nauseated. And
Ah.
I liked coffee. So I thought, well, that's weird. So, but it's kept
Yeah.
happening every day. And finally, I thought to myself, you might be pregnant.
Right.
So, yep. We had a friend who worked in my lab. And so Joe took a specimen down. They checked out urine
Oh,
specimens.
yeah.
He took it down
Yeah.
there, and she ran the test, and
And
she
sure enough.
called him, not me, and said, "Yep, she's pregnant." So he told
Oh,
me, and I fainted, and then we, got up and went on from there. But
right.
yeah, so it was
So
10
then,
years basically before we had a baby.
wow. Wow, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
then not too long after that, now comes a diagnosis for you. How
Yes.
much how much longer into that? Well, was your
But
first child born?
Emily
Okay.
was maybe 6 months old or younger even when that
Hmm.
happened, and that was a direct intervention of God, because after I had a baby, that she was so tiny, I kept losing her. I mean, she was premature, and I would be holding her in
Oh.
my arms, and all of a sudden I looked down, and she'd slithered down between my side and the end of the couch, and you know,
No.
and but she was a tough little thing, which was good for her.
That's
So
good.
anyway, I took it all out on Joe because he had his dream job finally after 10 years. And he was
Yeah.
flying a Learjet for an oil company. And he was gone from Sunday afternoon to Friday night every single week. They were in New York.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I did not do well with this.
Sure.
And I became very angry. And I think what happened is my identity had been in my profession because I'd been
Mm-hmm.
working as a clinical microbiologist all this time.
Yeah.
But I stayed home because Joe said, I really am not comfortable with my baby's mother working at a place where she's working with things that could kill my baby.
Right.
I
Well,
thought,
I
okay, so
can
I
see
quit
the
my job.
concern.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But anyway, I was terrible. I really was terrible. My mother
Mhm.
she used to say to me, don't be ugly, Rita Carroll,
Oh,
which means be nice.
you were in trouble. That's right.
Oh
You had
boy.
to be
So
nice.
I was being ugly. I was really being ugly. And I almost uglied myself right into a divorce. And then
Oh, yeah.
I said to the Lord, I'm horrible. I'm horrible. I'm no good as a wife. I'm just awful. You need to either do something about this or take me out.
Yeah.
And I think about that now and I think, what a dumb thing to say to God.
Because he's the one that could do it.
Oh yeah, but that's my first experience with this kind of thing. So
Right.
anyway, one week later, I had a doctor's appointment. I went to see my gynecologist. It was time for a little checkup, and as he left the room after saying "You're fine, you're fine," I was laying there. You know how you put your head up on the examining table because it's hard. Well, he
Right.
looked at the back of my arm as he walked by me, and there was a mole there.
Oh,
And all of a sudden, he grabbed hold of my arm and he looked at it and he said, you need to see a dermatologist today. Stay right here. I'm going to go call a friend of mine. That afternoon,
wow.
I saw this dermatologist and he said, you need to see a surgeon tomorrow. And I have a friend in this
Ah,
office building. He can do that. So I
it
was
was
with
urgent.
went to the surgeon and he looked at it and he said, if we're lucky, this won't be melanoma, but I would bet my life it is.
Ah,
And so he took this enormous chunk out of my back of my arm
of course.
and sent it off for biopsy. And sure enough, it was a melanoma. And the next week, I was at MD Anderson having surgery. And
Wow.
it was already deeply embedded. It was had grown a lot. I didn't know about it. And so they
Mm-hmm.
told me that I had a 80% chance of dying and a 10% chance of living through this.
Wow.
And by the way, don't have any more children because it's hormone stimulated. And so, I went home thinking, well,
That's it.
yeah, what are we going to do now? One day I was driving someplace, and the devil, who frequently came to tell me that I was going to die, said to
Of
me,
course.
you will never, ever see this child grow up.
Mm,
And
that had to have hurt.
I slammed on the brake and I said, that might be true, but it isn't true today. So go away and leave me alone in the name
What a
of Jesus. And he
wonderful thing
did.
to
He
say.
went away. And
Yeah.
furthermore, he didn't come back. So anyway, so we just kept
Well,
going. We just kept going and
yeah.
doing what we were doing.
So, but eventually then you were fine and then you did go ahead and have another child.
Yes, after 4 years, I thought, yeah, I'm fine. I'm not going to have any more problems. So, one night Joe said, are we safe? I said, yes. And, then 3 weeks later, I said, Joe, I think I might be pregnant.
Oh.
And he had a fit. He said, you better not be, because
Oh
he was
no.
so afraid.
He got scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
sure enough, I had, we had a little boy, and
Yeah.
so now we had a little girl and a little boy, and they were both gorgeous, and we were happy.
Mhm.
And then it was time to go. Then one day I felt this stabbing pain under my arm, and I stuck my hand up there,
Oh,
like, what's that? And I felt this lump, and I knew right away, that it was a lymph node. And so I went in
right.
and called MD Anderson, and they said, get down here. And I
Yeah.
went and had surgery. and they took out several lymph nodes under my arm
Mm-hmm.
and said, you know, it doesn't change your prognosis, and you still got an 80% chance of dying and
You're like, well, I've
twenty
done
percent
pretty
chance
good
of
so
living.
far.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but the baby came and it was wonderful, and we were happy, and I didn't have any more problems after that. I mean, and that was 1980 when I had that second surgery, and
Mm-hmm.
I've never had anything, any more problems with the cancer. I've had problems with my arm because they took out lymph nodes and it made it have
Yeah.
lymphedema and it was swelling, and all that. And it's misbehaved several times, but they fix it, so it's okay. Anyway, that was the end of the cancer thing.
That was the end of that. So
That
there
was the
was
end of that.
a lot of little life changing, kind of
Yeah.
going on for you, through this from the time of, you have to be a stay at home mom now, not the microbiologist. You get cancer yourself and not too long after that, your husband gets cancer,
Yes.
right?
He
And
was he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma,
mhm.
which is a fatal blood disease. It eats the marrow of the bones until they, become like powder and they break. And
Wow.
so they told him he would only live 3 years at that point. Well, Mark was 5 and Emily was 9 then, so that
Hmm.
was not a very good
Yeah.
diagnosis. But God was very, very gracious, and Joe went through that period and was fine and flew all over the world and had a wonderful time. And, you know, we had a good time at church, and we were teaching Sunday school and, just doing our regular being married things. And we had a great marriage. Joe was a wonderful, wonderful husband, much, much better temperamental than I was. He wasn't temperamental. But I got over it too. I mean, I had a good example of what can happen if you test God, and decided not to do that anymore. So, yeah,
I think we kind of all do that from time to time. Somewhere in here, you got a chance to go back to microbiology, right? Where in there did you get
I
to go
did
back to
work.
teaching?
Yeah, I worked some in the lab, and enjoyed it. And I went back about the time that AIDS came in. AIDS was
Oh,
not even heard of when I left the lab the first time, and
right.
that was a little bit scary. Um,
Yeah.
especially when you have little kids and everything. But if you have good lab technique, it's supposed to keep you from getting things like that. And apparently mine was good enough to not let me get sick. So that was okay.
Yeah.
So
That is good.
we had a really good, 10, 15 years, and 10 years, I guess, until Joe got sick again, till it, got worse.
Because he had a fall, right? He had
No,
a fall
he
at
fell
that
several
time.
times. Yeah.
Okay.
He fell.
I mean, it's in.
Yeah. He thought he had dislocated his hip,
Uh huh.
but actually there were some tumors in that joint. And when we went back to when he went to the ER, they found them, and then he had surgery, and yeah, then
All
they
of them
started him on medicine to to that
to
was like
try to help.
chemotherapy, but he didn't have to stay in the hospital. He just took this medication, and that
Okay.
that held it at bay for a while. And then, but eventually, at 1990, I don't know, in the 1990s, it came back, and he was pretty much in treatment for the rest of his life after that, till he passed away in
Sure.
1998.
So tell me about the night with Joe and the song Time to Say Goodbye. What were those moments
Yeah.
like?
Well, that was in the last year of his life. He came to me one day and he said, I want to stop the treatments that I'm taking, because all they could do at that point was they would radiate any tumors that arose in his joints, in his bones, just to slow it down a little bit. They
Mm-hmm.
couldn't fix it. And he said, I would like to stop the treatments now. And
Yeah.
he says, is that okay with you? And
What do you say to that?
yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing what you can think and it not be what comes out of your mouth, because I
Sure.
was thinking, no, it's not okay with me. But I said, honey, you need to do whatever you need to do and we'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he did. He stopped having the treatments and he lived about, oh gosh, I guess 2 months after that. Because
Okay.
the tumors just kept multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. And so we
Oh.
decided to move. We had a 2-story house, and our bed was upstairs in our bedroom. So we decided we would move downstairs into the lowest, into one of the bedrooms down there. And so the
Mm-hmm.
last day that we were in our room before we moved, we were laying on the bed resting, and we were listening to music, and
Mm-hmm.
he was behind me, and so his head was about, up right, his face was right behind my neck, actually. And so the
Yeah.
song Time to Say Goodbye came on, which is a
Oh.
beautiful song. But,
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Deeper meaning for you.
yeah. And we, of course, had heard it. I had heard it before.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just laying there listening to it. Nobody said a word. And I was thinking, I couldn't say anything. I didn't say anything. Neither
Yeah.
did he. But then that wasn't unusual for Joe because he
Oh,
didn't say things a whole lot. He was very quiet. Now I was the one that made all the noise in the family, and so
right.
yeah. And
That's
I
how
was
it
thinking
works.
I couldn't think about it. I had to not, because I thought if I really think about this or say anything, I'm going to cry, and that's
Right.
that will distress
Sure.
them. And then all of a sudden, I
The
felt tears running down the back of my neck.
oh.
Joe was crying, and the
Oh.
tears were running down the back of my neck. And it's like
Yeah.
nobody said anything.
Right.
So
Oh.
sometimes now I think and stop and
Sometimes
think,
you don't need words.
I wish I'd have said a few more things, but
Yeah.
he just wasn't much of a talker, and so we
Yeah.
just lay there until, I don't know, maybe we went to sleep. I don't know if we went to sleep or not, but whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
eventually, it was the song stopped.
That would probably
So,
make a beautiful poem, actually. The Tears Down My Back and
yeah.
a love story. That would be a beautiful poem, a beautiful little story. Okay, so now Joe does pass away. And like we do when our loved ones pass away, now comes the grief, the numbness, the sadness. When all this started to settle in to your thoughts, what was going on for you?
Well, the last 2 years of Joe's life were, I mean, he didn't work anymore. He couldn't fly, and we had a lot of difficulties. But
Mm-hmm.
we knew that God was taking care of us, and we were going to be okay. We had a lot of friends who helped us, a church that helped us,
Mm-hmm.
and and we would sit in our room, and we agreed that these 2 last years were the best years of our marriage. Because
Oh,
we didn't
yeah.
we didn't take the time to argue or anything like that. There's just
Anything.
wasn't time. We just
Every moment counted.
every minute on it, and we
So tell me about getting pulled over and getting the ticket.
that was later. That was after he died. I went back to, I was working at the library by then, so I went back to the work at the library after he had been gone. I think maybe a couple of weeks because I needed to start working again, and
hmm
I had a job. I was cataloging books at the time. Now they do it with a computer and you just plug it in and they tell you what to do. You give it
Right.
that little Dewey Decimal number, but I had to look at a book and figure out what Dewey Decimal number this particular book needed. So I had to think really, really hard. So I didn't cry while I was at work. I just
Mm,
worked. But as soon as I got in my car, I would start to cry. And we lived
yeah.
about 15 miles out Walnut Grove Road. So I would cry and drive all the way
Yeah.
home. And one day, I don't know what happened. I don't think I drove that way every day, but that particular day, I heard a siren behind me and saw lights and looked at my speedometer, and I was doing 90 miles an hour on Sistervale
Woo!
Road. And I nearly had a heart attack just realizing that. So I pulled over, and this lady policeman, or I guess she was with the sheriff's, with the county, I mean, yeah, the county stuff. So she's
Yeah.
stopped and started talking to me, and she could tell I'd been crying. She says, "What's the matter, ma'am?" And I didn't tell her. I didn't want to tell her because she
Oh,
wanted to help me so much, and she didn't really want to give me a ticket. I could tell.
yeah.
But I thought, you know what? You need this ticket. That was stupid. You could have killed somebody. You could have killed yourself. Then what would your
Oh,
children have done? And all these things,
oh,
that you think when you're. So
yeah.
I just kept saying, it's okay, it's okay. And so finally she wrote me a ticket, and it was a very expensive lesson because I had to do remedial driving and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff,
yes.
and I thought I was going to lose my license, but I didn't. So eventually, I did some really dumb things during that time. That's something that really surprised me about grief. I knew about the
Yes.
crying, but I didn't know that you lost your marbles.
Yeah.
And I was really just pretty much not in my right mind. I mean,
Mhm.
I backed out of my garage one day without opening the door.
Yeah.
That was the second really expensive lesson I had. The ticket was the first one, and things like that. I just was not thinking. And
Right. Probably you weren't eating a lot either, and sugar level drops. And when that happens too, it all
yeah,
messes with your mind. So
yeah,
very understandable.
yeah.
So then now this is all through, and something comes up about Bible school for you. How did that come about
Vacation. I mean, it was yeah, going to Bible
in
school.
England? Uh
Well,
huh.
after Joe had been gone for 3 years,
Mm hmm.
and the kids were, Emily was, I think Mark was 19, Emily was 4 years older at that point. They
Yeah.
didn't really need me anymore. They didn't live with me. They had jobs and took care of themselves, and I was so grateful because I wasn't a very attentive mother during those years. I was really, really, I don't know who was there. I don't think it was me, but it looked like
Oh,
me. So I got
right.
away with
There
it.
you go.
Anyway, so I was thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I had some really good friends at His Hill Bible School that I'd known for many, many years. And they invited me to come out and visit. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went out there to visit, and the lady who used to own the property that His Hill is on, in fact, she leased it to His Hill. And
Uh-huh.
we were talking, and I said to them, I said, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? There's
Yeah.
nothing I want to do.
Hmm.
And nothing seemed like it would be worthwhile to do except, watch after the kids. And obviously they didn't need me right then. Um,
Hmm.
So this lady, the older lady, said, "You know what? You're going to go to Bible school."
Oh,
And I was so shocked that I didn't even argue with her. I said, "Oh, okay," because I'd
okay.
always wanted to go, but I got married instead.
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, where am I going?" She said, "You're going to go to England. You're going to go to Capernwray Hall because that's
Wow.
the flagship of the Torchbearers schools." And
Okay.
there's 27 of them. They're around the world in many countries. And so
Okay.
yeah. So she said,
Off
"Yep,
you
I'll
go.
write a letter there to the registrar." And I got accepted. And the man said,
Oh.
"I feel honor bound to tell you that you will be the oldest student there." Because, who goes to Bible school is kids right out of college, I mean, right out of high school.
Sure.
It's a gap year kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
so I was 56 years old at the time.
Woo, you're an
And
old woman.
yeah, and the only thing that worried me is when I get there, they're going to put me in a room with, 10, 18-year-olds, and I'm going to
Hmm.
die of them giggling.
Right.
There'll be no sleep. I won't be able to sleep. So I was really worried about that. But I sold the house because we had paid it off with Joe's insurance, sold the house, paid my tuition, sold the car, told my parents I was leaving the country, told the kids, they were fine with it. Both of them were.
Yeah.
And so I went. And, you know, out of the probably five most important decisions in my life, that one was real near the top.
I can
So
imagine that's
it
a
was
huge adventure.
fabulous adventure. And right from the northern England and the beautiful hills, and we were 90 minutes from Scottish border. It was
Okay.
just a dream come true because I'd always wanted to go to England. I was a real Anglophile, and
Yes.
so that was a wonderful thing. And oh my goodness, and that's where I really came face to face with my relationship with God.